events have pretty much lined up this week in such a perfect constellation that I think it would be a good idea to do sort of a deep dive into friend of the show and editor-in-chief of The Atlantic magazine, Jeffrey Goldberg.
Oh, hey,
Yes.
Jeff.
Hey, Jeffrey.
Yes, the great helmsman of mainstream liberal thought. As
Yeah.
you see in the East Coast in general.
And you know what? This is going to be, people will accuse this of being a negative segment, but I do want to say Goldberg, he's an impressive guy. He went from being in the WWE to being the editor of the top magazine in orthodontist waiting rooms. So never let anyone tell you what you can and can't do. That's what I got to say.
Jeffrey had an amazingly busy week. A lot of ups and downs, a lot of ins and outs, Maud. But I want to begin with his interview with the new Saudi Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman.
Another friend of the show.
Yeah.
Now, you'll remember when we covered Thomas Friedman's sit-down throat job with the Crown Prince in the pages of the New York Times. I think Jeffrey Goldberg has topped, if you'll allow me to use that phrase, even Thomas Friedman in just how sloppy he can get to this beautiful new prince.
Our precious boy.
Goldberg and MBS, talk about big boy season. If only Kevin was there, that is... That's probably why they got Kevin fired, is because they're like, no, too many big boys in one place.
We will get to this Kevin saga in a moment. Because it is very epic.
I did see a picture of MBS in his jeans, and he is a large lad. He's thick.
He's like 6'5", and he's thick.
He rocks those size 50 Levi's, Kevin.
Yes.
He the other thing about that picture, it was probably the most disastrous part of the Saudi PR push, the Mbs Hairline Reveal.
No, not great.
Oh my
Not
God.
great.
But look, my hairline, it's receding a little bit. It's going to be fine. I'm doing natural holistic treatments. It's going to be back down to where it's supposed to be, right in the middle of my eyebrows. But Kevin D. Williamson, Mohammed bin Salman, which is the, Kevin D. Williamson is the anglicized version of Mohammed bin Salman. That's why I got it mixed up. His hairline looks like chicken wire. It's incredible. His hairline looks like you need to take a hacksaw to it and go over the top.
Felix, as you discovered, your hairline is currently just thin enough to not be able to do cornrows for comedy gags and spoofs.
Yeah, so, to all the people who say, like, oh, you'll never know what it's like to have, like, ALS or something. Actually, I do. I can't get cornrows because my hair is too thin now.
But this is why we're going to do a GoFundMe for hair plugs so that Felix can do cultural appropriation.
We weren't getting cornrows just to have me have cornrows. It was for a video about how it's cool to have cornrows.
Yeah.
But no, I want to get hair plugs that are permanently cornrows, just implanted in my skull.
Just stapled in there.
Yeah.
So the Crown Prince is doing his charm offensive of America right now. It's part of this huge PR push that, we've been talking about on this show for a while now, all the way back to when we talked about Saudi Vision 2030, this bold new plan to reform the kingdom and make it a little bit friendlier to its important allies in the West, namely America, or rather the American media, so they can stop covering the country like it's a, totalitarian theocracy that did 9/11. They have a bad
doing
image.
a genocide right now.
Yeah, and are also doing a genocide right now.
They put out an entire magazine in supermarket shelves across the country, right?
That was amazing.
That National Enquirer, I think, published it.
Yeah, it was $15. And somebody took a picture of it. I think it was in Nebraska or something. Can you imagine some fucking corn husker? He's got his Mountain Dew and his mega-sized Doritos, and he's waiting for the checkout.
Yeah,
and
we know Trump country.
And he sees this picture. He sees this thing like, wow, this guy looks like he's really going to reform the Middle East. I better take a look.
I wish I could bet you money on how many Trump idiots bought it. I bet it's no less than 2,000 people.
Oh, yeah.
Because think about it.
I would
think
say.
about how many
that
people,
sounds about right.
Think about how many people shot their Keurigs or just did whatever idiotic thing, like went into Starbucks and said their name was the Constitution. They probably saw that and was like, oh, he's nice to Trump.
Yeah,
like
he's
him.
the guy who's going to get rid of all the terrorists because he put Trump's fat face on the side of a building.
I think what's important, though, in addition to doing a circular at every supermarket in America, the real goal here for MBS, the go-to guy is Jeffrey Goldberg. If you want a
He's the plug.
If he's the plug, he is the plug to like the one of the most prestigious flagships of the liberal media, and is also a committed partisan to the whatever the Israeli government does or thinks.
Yes.
So
dining partner.
So
Barack
the idea that we now want to reform Saudi Arabia and its leaders is very important at a time in which the United States and particularly Israel have to toe the line on this rotten country because we all have the same enemies in the Middle East. And Jeffrey Goldberg is perhaps one of the most reliable conduits for that particular line of thinking, be it from the American or Israeli intelligence communities. This is what this guy exists to do. It's why he's the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic, which I think we'll get into later. So let's begin in this interview here. The headline is, Saudi Crown Prince, Iran's supreme leader makes Hitler look good.
Damn.
You Make Hitler Look Good is the B-side to You Give Love a Bad Name. Wasn't as well received.
The interview begins. This much, at least, can be said for Mohammed bin Salman, the putatively reformist crown prince of Saudi Arabia. He has made all the right enemies. Among those who would celebrate his end are the leaders of ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Hezbollah, and Hamas.
4-year-olds in Yemen dying of kwashiorkor.
As well as Yemen's Houthi rebels.
And all the swollen
and
children.
The entire clerical and military
Instagram
leadership.
models who just want to be left alone.
And it says here, it goes on, he says, our conversation took place in Prince Khalid's living room beneath a painting depicting the 1945 meeting between President Franklin Roosevelt and King Abdul Aziz ibn Saud, the founder of modern Saudi Arabia.
I wish it was DJ Khalid.
Shout out to that reference to Adam Curtis in the film Bitter Lake, which takes its title from that very meeting in the Suez Canal between Roosevelt and the founder of the House of Saud.
The beginning of a beautiful relationship.
A beautiful relationship that has really blossomed into so many wonderful things in the modern world. The collaboration between the post-war United States empire and fanatical, theocratic, oil-rich Saudi Arabia.
It's been awesome for everyone.
Lots of fun franchises all over the world. You've probably visited their locations in Afghanistan, the Caucasus region, anywhere. They have just, they're like when a doctor gets really into franchising subways.
Now, the interview begins where he, tees up a nice, big, easy softball for MBS by saying, could you start by talking about Islam and the role you think it should play in the world? And it gives him a chance to say, Islam is a religion of peace. And then go on to say, our duty is to spread the word of God, but, we also believe in freedom as well. But then he says, now today in the triangle of evil, and Goldberg says, the triangle of evil? And MBS says, yes, I will explain in a moment. In this triangle, they are trying to promote the idea that our duty as Muslims is to reestablish the caliphate, to reestablish the mindset of the caliphate, that the glory of Islam is in building an empire by force. But God didn't ask us to do this, and the Prophet Muhammad did not ask us to do this. So he's talking about caliphate mindset, and he wants to reassure all of the readers that Saudi Arabia and Islam, the modern version of it, does not seek to establish a caliphate by force. But Goldberg says about the triangle, and MBS says, first in the triangle, we have the Iranian regime that wants to spread their extremist ideology, their extremist Shiite ideology. They believe if they spread it, the hidden imam will come back again and he will rule the world from Iran and spread Islam even to America. So he's like, yeah, all the things that we're accused of doing, actually it's Iran that's doing it, and it's the Shiite extremism.
Oh.
And he's bringing up our good friend, the hidden imam. Everyone take a drink.
Yeah, because, like the people who actually did try to establish a caliphate by force very recently, you guys might have remembered hearing about that. They really definitely were in favor of all of the Shia ideas. They were very Shia friendly.
Oh, they were worshiping fire, doing all the bad things that they do. No, I like that. They're not Iran's goal is not any geopolitical aim. They just have to collect the Dragon Balls and get their one wish to bring Ayatollah Khomeini back.
So the first part of the triangle is Iran. The second part is the Muslim Brotherhood. And the third part are the terrorists, which are Al-Qaeda, ISIS, and everyone who believes in caliphate mindset.
Wait a minute. I'm confused.
I think it will reveal itself as the interview goes.
Like the Mahdi. It's like an advent calendar. Oh, we got Syria. Oh, we got Yemen. Oh, we got the biggest piece of chocolate. It's the Mahdi.
Now, Goldberg is, of course, a serious journalist.
Yes.
He's not going to use this opportunity to talk to this young prince, not press him on some hard, tough issues.
Crown Prince Solomon, can Tekashi 6ix9ine say the N-word? I'm glad you asked, Jeffrey.
He says, isn't it true, though, that after 1979, but before 1979 as well, the more conservative factions in Saudi Arabia were taking oil money and using it to export a more intolerant extremist version of Islam, Wahhabist ideology, which could be understood as a kind of companion ideology to Muslim Brotherhood thinking? MBS responds, first of all, this Wahhabism, please define it for us. We're not familiar with it. We don't know about it.
Can you define the word, please? Can you use it in a sentence?
Goldberg says, what do you mean you don't know about it? And MBS says, what is Wahhabism? And Goldberg says, you're the crown prince of Saudi Arabia. You know what Wahhabism is.
Damn.
MBS says, no one can define this Wahhabism. It's like neoliberalism.
Yes.
It's just a slur that, people use for,
Well, that is an old line. That is an old line saying that Wahhabism is a slur and then it's not a real thing and then it's just normal Islam, which is pretty cool. I mean, if the guy who started my religion got kicked out of his village for stoning too many women to death, I'd probably be like, yeah, well, who's that bitch? I don't know her. when your main chick finds your second phone, when your main family finds your second secret family, and in Wahhabism, that second family doesn't have to be secret.
Are we talking about Wahhabism or Marco Rubio? Folks, Marco Rubio.
Allegedly.
So he presses him on Wahhabism, and MBS says, no one can define Wahhabism. There is no Wahhabism. We don't believe we have Wahhabism. We believe we have in Saudi
Wait a minute. We
Arabia.
don't have the thing that we don't know what it is?
Yeah, we don't know what it is, but we don't have it, and we
Okay.
can't define it even if we did have it. We believe we have in Saudi Arabia Sunni and Shiite. We believe we have within Sunni Islam 4 schools of thought. And then he goes on to talk about those schools of thought and give a sort of filibuster, this long, meandering answer about all the different schools of thought in Sunni Islam.
Yeah, you've got Inche, Entje.
And then Goldberg asks, but what, he's pressing him here. This is real journalism.
Mr. Too Damn Journalist.
He says, what about the funding of extremists? MVS says, when you talk about funding before 1979, you were talking about the Cold War. You had communism spreading everywhere, threatening the United States and Europe and also us. Egypt had turned into that time into that sort of regime. We worked with whomever we could use to get rid of communism. Among those was the Muslim Brotherhood. We financed them in Saudi Arabia, and the United States of America financed them. True. Very true.
Wait, does he go on to say they stopped doing it after 79?
No, he says, well, in the Cold War they were doing it, and then after the Cold War...
But that's like that's when it became its most coordinated. That's when they kicked it into its highest gears in 79. After the seizure of the Grand Mosque. After they were like, we can take all of our devout men and send them overseas into proxy wars and accomplish even more of our goals. Because we have more money now. Holy shit.
That was the Cold War when we had to defeat communism. As IBS tells you, the America funded the Muslim Brotherhood too. This is making a lot of sense to me, and this is the first time anyone has been able to explain Middle Eastern politics to me. I'm sorry, Felix.
I was talking to those other girls when I didn't know you really liked me like that before 1979.
So they have a little back and forth about the funding of extremism, and Goldberg gets a chance to say this line. I spent a lot of time in Pakistan and Afghanistan in the late 1990s and early 2000s. Thanks, Jeff.
Wow. You take any interesting cab rides over there, Jeff? Please tell me about them.
Are you angling for an internship?
Yeah, I have a global perspective. Thank you, Jeff. My summer abroad was the most wonderful experience of my life.
So they have a back and forth on this, and then Goldberg says, you think you'll ever be friendly with Qatar again? And MBS says, it has to happen one day. We hope they learn fast. It depends on them. So here's where it gets really good. Goldberg says, and this is it gets to the heart of what Goldberg really believes in and wants to get out of this interview. He says, you speak extraordinarily bluntly about Iran and its ideology. You've even equated the supreme leader to Hitler. What makes him a Hitler? Hitler is the worst thing you can be.
Oh, man, you don't want a Hitler, dude.
And IBS says, I believe the Iranian supreme leader makes Hitler look good. Goldberg, really? Hitler didn't want to do what the supreme leader is trying to do. Hitler tried to conquer Europe. This is bad. Goldberg just says, yes, very bad. But think about that fucking follow-up.
But what does he say that
He says Hitler tried to conquer Europe, but what Iran is trying to do is worse than that.
But what
very
does
bad.
he say that Iran is
He
trying to
doesn't
do that's
say.
worse than
He doesn't say.
They want to make the caliphate.
Oh no, he does.
yeah.
He does
In the
say.
triangle. Remember the triangle theory?
Oh, right.
Yeah, that's why Phil
you.
Jackson is
Yeah,
head of the
Iran
new
is running the
caliphate.
triangle offense. No, he does say. Goldberg says, yes, very bad. And MBS says, but the supreme leader is trying to conquer the world.
What?
He's trying to conquer the world.
He's doing a pretty shitty job of it.
He believes he owns the world. They are both evil guys. He is the Hitler of the Middle East. In the 1920s and 30s, no one saw Hitler as a danger. Only a few
that's not
people, including his family, who received him warmly and had close relations with the Adolf Hitler.
They have heirlooms that Hitler gave them, or that they bought. But wait, so Khomeini's trying to take over the world.
Khomeini's dead. but-
Khomeini, I'm sorry.
Khomeini.
Yeah.
The supreme leader of Iran.
I just woke up.
They should have more than two letters differentiating their names.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Well, that's what makes him worse than Hitler.
Yeah.
Well, actually, that's how you know he was as bad as Hitler, because there was Hitler and Himmler, and they did that to confuse people. It was like rabbit season and duck season. Maybe Khomeini isn't really dead. Maybe I'm right about that Dragon Ball plot, that they're going to bring him back to life when they collect the Mahdi balls.
So Iran is trying to take over the world, and we have to stop them before they do, just like Hitler.
They're doing a very shitty job.
Yeah, they control like what 0.5% of the world.
They have a military budget that's a fraction
Also,
of America's.
it would be instructional to just look at a map of the nation of Iran and Persia over the last 1,000 years to see how many times it's expanded its border.
You know, they were really close to taking over the world during the Peloponnesian Wars.
Yep.
And then the first Wahhabists, the Spartans, stopped them.
Okay, so he says here, we want to avoid war. And Goldberg says, is the problem in your mind religious? And IBS says, as I told you, the Shiites are living normally in Saudi Arabia. We have
Having a normal one. Having a normal one. I wake up, I make my tea, I get bulldozed and shot by internal security. Just having
we
a
have
normal
no
one.
problem with Shiites. Like he said, they're living very normally.
Yeah,
in
as
Saudi
Stalin
Arabia.
said, no Shiites, no problem.
So he goes on. He filibusters again. Very long answer on what Obama thought about Iran versus Trump. He basically says they both believe that Iran is a problem, but they had different approaches to it. So he avoids criticizing Obama. Goldberg then asks, speaking of painful decisions, are you making the situation in Yemen worse through military actions that are causing humanitarian catastrophes? There is a lot of justified criticism of your bombing campaigns. That is a really artfully worded question, and it does bring to mind the sort of phrasing that the New York Times or other outlets will use to describe what's currently happening in Gaza right now, where it's just sort of like, some critics might be saying that your war is something that they might consider genocidal. Or the New York Times, this is a real headline from today. Sporadic rifle fire from the Israeli side of the Gaza border made clear that the Palestinian protests could elicit the sort of response that killed 20 people a week ago. So going on, MBS's answer to this is, first of all, we have to go back to real evidence, real data. I'm not even going to read the rest of his answer
MBS
here.
just scrolling through screens Minority Report style, and half those screens are just Instagram models, and he's throwing hearts and commenting like, I love you, you're so beautiful, come here. And then on the other side of the screen, just Google like how to pretend something doesn't exist.
Welcome,
That's Wahhabism.
welcome MBS to the Vox.com masthead.
And so, yeah, he lets him skate on the idea that
He's murdering
that
the
he's
entire
carrying out a
country?
genocide in Yemen. And then, there's not much more in this interview. He gets him to say that, Israel has a right to exist and that Saudi Arabia has no problem with Jewish people either. And that prompted David Frum to say that MBS is now officially better on Judaism and Israel than Jeremy Corbyn is.
Right.
MBS is the head of the country where if you are Jewish, you're not allowed inside it. And if you practice the religion openly, you will be executed.
Well, he is right, though. I mean, this is a better friend to Israel than Jeremy Corbyn.
That's true.
That's the thing. That's all that matters when people when Frum and Goldberg talk about being good. They're not talking about being good for Jews. They're not talking about creating an environment where Jews are open in a society, they're talking about supporting Israel. That's all that matters, because the whole goal for all of these motherfuckers is to get all the Jews into Israel eventually and turn it into just a steroidal nuclear powerhouse down there.
Every single Jew in Israel for a huge party.
Yeah, that's the idea.
Well, you know, when two big boys get together, you get a great big belly full of truth.
Well, here's what I don't get. So MBS has all this money to spend on, propaganda, but they still sell the tabloid. They don't just give it away, they sell it.
Because they're in America. If something's free, it's worthless. That is what we know. And
Now,
they understand that much about us to know that.
How many flyers have you been given in your life?
Of thousands.
Yeah.
What have you followed up on? Probably only the flyer we were giving out to get a new host for the show.
I've got a filing cabinet full of them, and one of these days when I get some free time, I'm going to go through
Now,
them.
you
All
said-
those offers.
Imagine they're like the Spartacists. They're just hanging out around convention centers, selling the MBS, or just handing out the MBS issue of National
But it's
Enquirer.
glossy, and there's fun.
Yeah,
There's
exactly.
trivia in it. There's
Exactly.
gossip.
That's
there's
why it's worth
there's
money.
A crossword puzzle.
Okay.
Before we get into more Jeffo, there has been this multi-month long push where MBS will talk to whatever shitty liberal journalist, whether it's Goldberg or Friedman, et cetera, et cetera. But the one thing he got that is worth more than 1,000 of those combined is the Rock cosign.
Yep.
He got co-signed by Dwayne The Rock Johnson. Dwayne All Rock Johnson, as he is now called.
Yep.
That's a very Bill Maher joke. Please put it in the real time.
Well, how about this? Why doesn't he just buy The Atlantic or any of these other publications? They have more than enough money to do it.
Remember when people told us we should run a news site? No one wants to get into that business.